So our last speaker of the day before we get everybody back up on stage for a Q&A is Roger Drudge from Roxeter, Ontario, who is here representing the farm that he and brothers Jerry and Jeff run out of the Roxeter area in North Huron County. They farm 2,000 acres cash crops and have been quite involved in the development of cover crops as part of their systems. They have been no-till since '98. They only use tillage to level a field where tile drainage installation has occurred. They also operate a grain elevator as a receiving point for Hensa Co-op. They work with their parents and families every spring to process maple syrup from 7,600 taps. The Drudge brothers are passionate about soil health, growing better crops with less inputs, and trying new ideas in an ever-changing world. Ladies and gentlemen, Roger Drudge.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to see a crowd that's ready to soak up new ideas and improve on some old things, maybe some old stuff we have to pitch. How many here today were at the conference 2 years ago when Ray Archuleta was speaking? Raise your hand. Okay, Ian, you got a pretty good repeat crowd here. How many of you folks planted green this spring or last year for the first time because of that? Raise your hand. All right, not very many. Brave souls. How many are going to do it again in 2017? Oh, there we go. Okay, for the OMAFRA staffra, these guys are doing, and gals are doing it without any funding from the government. They're trying this stuff on their own farms and seeing if it works and making it work out of their own pockets. So I think they deserve our credit. One more survey question. How many used a moldboard plow in the fall of 2016? Be honest. Okay. I have my hand up too because I did it as well. And like Ian said in the introduction, we do some plowing after tile installation. But how about this kind of plowing? He's got his phone on hands-free, but the Bluetooth keeps falling off his ear. There's no seagulls around because they're waiting for the smoke to clear before they land. I think we should put carbon tax on plowing. The guys are planting down at Ohio State University at 11 miles an hour. We plow at 18 miles an hour. We farm up west of Listowel there on the Highway 86 and do cash crop and custom work on 2,200 acres. And we've been working with no-till since '98 and also run the elevator there. And also do syrup every spring. That's been part of our family heritage ever since we moved to this area, and comes even from my ancestors longer ago. So the trees, the maple trees are no-till, non-GMO, no neonics, and so we're right up to speed. Our outline for today is to look at solutions to soil compaction or preventing it, and improving soil structure, and some outlines along that regard. We haven't always won the battle. We're still learning as we go, and we'll share some of the things that went wrong. And at the end of the presentation, hopefully a few things that you can put in your pocket and take home. These are some quotes from people that are smarter than myself. Factors that destroy soil structure include compaction, cultivation, removal of vegetation, and excessive moving and handling of soil. And so from our perspective, we're looking at soil structure as being the best way to mitigate or eliminate the cause of soil compaction. And this whole seminar today is about compaction. But we have to look beyond that and look at our whole system and the way we're doing things, and maybe have to look at it from several different angles. And so as a prime example, the excessive moving and handling of soil, which probably doesn't occur very often in the life of your farm, but a couple of years ago I rehabbed an old gravel pit area, and so we moved the clay, moved the gravel, got it all layered right, put topsoil back on top where it belongs. We deep ripped it because of all the compaction with the heavy earth moving equipment. We tile drained it, so now it should be good to go. Well, a week later we had, and planted a cover crop. And a week later we had a 4-inch rain, and I declare to this day none of that soaked in because the soil structure was so shot from all that rearranging that it just wouldn't percolate even with the deep ripping, even with the tile drainage. So it does take a while to get that structure back to the way it was created and put in place. The other quote there is, compaction occurs when the load exceeds the carrying capacity of the soil. And I think that's key. And that was a quote that we picked up years ago at a no-till conference down in the U.S., and that kind of stuck with us. And I think that was a driving force, that statement, in helping us go forward and managing our decisions as a farming operation. That's not off the internet. That's a rented farm. Now, if we would have had four-wheel drive on that combine, we'd maybe been able to slog through, but it was a two-wheel drive. And so it only took 10 minutes to get it in there. It took a day and a half to get it out. We had this brainwave to call the red dealer and see if he could give us a trade price as is where is. He said the depreciation would really hurt. And so we tried pulling and getting it out, and every turn of the wheel took it down another 6 inches, and the subsoil in that corner of the field was something like white peanut butter, and it just did not carry. And by the end of the first day, we were about ready to order a tombstone. Excavator helped us get it out. Just to illustrate again, when you have soil disturbance such as tillage and tile draining, all that happening, and the soil structure is weakened and compromised, and then some of these passes, you may run into those spots and get mired, and that's when you call for backup help. And so some goals on our farm is increasing our soil's carrying capacity and improving soil structure, and built into that whole scope of goal, we've embraced no-till and cover crops and that kind of thing. And so to go forward, we'll expand on that a little more. Along with those goals, one is to reduce compaction between our ears. Now, how do you evaluate that one? Sometimes other people can evaluate it better for me than I can myself. But to think outside the box, think about new concepts, and this conference is great at that because we've got some ideas here to work with that we don't just continue on in the same rut, so to speak, and break up some of the compaction between ears, because sometimes we think we're doing it right and we're not. And so it pays to learn from other people who are having positive experiences, and I appreciate everything we've heard today along that line. Expands my way of thinking and see if I can do something to improve. And more personal, I guess, is the goal to take care of God's creation and pass on the land and our opportunities in a better shape than what we found them to coming generations. And that doesn't happen automatically. It takes some forethought. So our first no-till equipment, we started off with some of the equipment we already had, which is the old white tractor there, jerk-o-matic transmission. It wasn't a good one for dentures. and I declare that the seed discs emptied out of that planter, and every time you shifted to another gear. But we kind of had a $1 drill and a 10-cent tractor there because we're putting our focus on soil engaging equipment and making sure we're planting right no matter what the horsepower looked like out front. And that's where we had to start. So we sold our tillage equipment line and bought a no-till drill and retrofitted our corn planter so that we could go out and indeed no-till crops and not have to do all the plant cultivating. And that was a interesting venture. And part of that came as a result of what we learned at no-till conferences and seeing what other people are doing and can indeed accomplish on their own place. Some of the early mistakes that we made along the way, we had sidewall compaction, say in a chaff row after the wheat came off. You have that slot that doesn't close very well, and seed obviously didn't make it up. There's a couple of spots there where the row is non-existent, and Jerry's back in there planting, patching in a couple of spots there around the three-leaf corn, and those are things you learn along the way. We found out slugs enjoy eating out the seed if they can get down to the trench. Some no-till successes was much better soil carrying capacity. We noticed that almost immediately, and it was a lot easier in equipment. And you think of some of the slides in the morning presentations about how the tire is rolling against that softer dirt. When the soil is firm, the equipment stays on top a lot better, a lot more carrying capacity, and less horsepower required to propel that unit down the field. Dramatically increased water infiltration on those heavy rain events. And believe it or not, we are able to maintain and improve yields, and we're fairly excited about that. A couple more points added to that slide is that there is much less erosion. We have fairly rolling hills there near Roxeter, and so those slopes would really have a lot of erosion going on if you had a big rainfall event, which is anything more than an inch. It can be a rainfall event that would move soil downhill. And one dramatic thing we noticed was no chocolate milk anymore. You know, right after you planted and you get a 2-inch rainfall, what color is the water down in the hole? It's chocolate milk. What color is the river going away from your place? The coloration is not good, folks. And we believe that no-till has helped us to eliminate contributing to that factor by sending soil downstream. Our cover crop history, we've done clover in the past. In wheat, just a fairly typical procedure. The non-typical aspect of this field is that you only get a clover stand like that once in 10 years. Or if you're a really good operator in a really poor wheat field, you might get one in every 5. That's a 5-gallon bucket there that's almost covered. Awesome, awesome crop of clover. And we just sprayed that off in the fall with Roundup and Amatrol and no-till corn in the next spring. But there was only a 70 bushel wheat crop, so what we lost, what we gained on clover, maybe have lost on wheat yield. Oats, peas, and radish then became our mainstay. If it was drilled after the wheat crop was off, had a lot more consistent stand across the field, and we're more pleased with the results with a drilled cover crop. And then since Ray Archuleta was here preaching 2 years ago, we started off with, or got into these crazy blends up to 19 species. Why in the world do you need 19 species in a cover crop blend? Well, we thought we'd try and see what it's like and throw in a mishmash of everything we can find, and the odd numbers sound better. 19 sounds better than 20. And so we've done that the last couple of years and had some interesting observations. Part of our change as a result of what we learned 2 years ago with aforementioned Ray was expanding our crop rotations to include up to 8 crops instead of just 3. And so got into canola and of course winter wheat, some yellow peas, some dry beans, soybeans, of course, some oats or spring grain, buckwheat. How many people here grow buckwheat? Wrong crowd. Oh, there's one. And corn, of course, the mainstay for profitability for Ontario, grow corn. Our current no-till equipment here is fairly factory equipped. Now, in the outline for the today's program, it said something about Ontario case studies. And I don't think they meant the brand of equipment, but we are running in the red. So there's a 1255 corn planter with a lead coulter and trash whippers, and the rest of the row unit there is pretty much standard equipment on a case planter. And out the back we have a little tube running down there dropping a mixture of nitrogen and starter 0x2, meaning 2 inches beside the row and on top of the ground. We also have the ability to drop starter straight in the row, right in the unit, right on the row unit with the seed. And our soybeans, dry beans, and any other crop we want to plant at 15-inch centers, we have the 1245 unit there with a lead coulter right on the unit. And then for our solid seeded crops, have a air seeder there from Salford with the disc gang out front. So there's a weaved coulter going down the row in front of each row unit. And so that's how we're planting all of our crops up to now. And so here's confession time. Some of the things that have gone wrong, some of the things that we've learned. And isn't it great you guys can profit from all my mistakes? And we're willing to admit that we haven't done everything right, but that's what you do when you do new things and research. I have pictures to back up 3 out of 4 of those. The one that I don't have is about the weeds that emerged. And one thing we found as after we planted into rye, rolled it down and sprayed it, then you got this thick mat of rye for the plants to come up through. And one thing that we need to brush up on is our crop scouting, because by the time the pigweed or the lamb's quarters comes through the mat of rye residue there, they're getting fairly tall. You don't see them right away. You don't see them from the pickup truck. And so you got to get out there and scout and look down through the residue mat to make sure that you've got the weeds in control. So that's one thing we need to be a little more up to date on. Here we have an example of different rye densities. And so on the left-hand side, we had rye planted with a bunch of other species at 20 pounds. And so over winter then, that was all that came through pretty much. And the spring we had, last spring, in 2016, we had 20 pounds of rye growing there. Down the center, we had a patch there with no other species in it, 45 pounds of rye, so it was a considerably heavier stand of rye there. And then over on the far side, the drill ran out and it started to rain, and so we had no rye at all. And so we have then the effects of the yield of the soybeans. 59 bushels, no rye. What would you expect? Just a little less with the right amount of rye. And the bummer, 46 bushels where there's too much rye. So overdoing rye cost us 13 bushels, but we only lost 2 bushels between 0 rye and 20 pounds of rye. So what are you going to take home? You're going to go back to bare ground? Is Drudge Farms going back to bare ground just because we get 2 bushels more of soybeans with no rye? Well, the 2 bushels isn't the whole story. And 2 bushels may be worth it on the cash market, but what it's worth to my farm and my ground in that field to have the effects of that 20 pounds of rye there is probably worth more to me than the 2 bushels of soybeans. So you can't just look at yield differences. You got to look at what it's doing for your whole system, and that's what we comfort ourselves with anyway. So looking at the effect of rye, and this is all cereal rye, by the way. We haven't played with annual rye grass. This is all cereal rye planted in the fall. And so we have 20 pounds of rye that we planted in mid-August following a wheat crop. On the left-hand side, planted green black beans, black turtle beans into that near the end of May. And the results are 25 bags an acre from the black bean yield. We're pretty impressed with that. Seemed to work out fairly good. Unfortunately, Jerry's field had 25 bags. My field had 15 bags, and I've been trying to work on them ever since to split the difference. But I hold the bag on that one. So there we have 50 pounds of rye planted in September, added the hog manure, an amazing crop of rye up to your armpits, and I was brave or foolish, but we planted black beans right into that in the end of May, and the end result was a little disappointing. But I do maintain that if we would have had proper moisture immediately following planting, I think we would have done fairly well because it was really dry during that time, and admittedly the ryegrass did pull a lot of moisture out of the seed trenches right after planting, but we did have an excellent seed-to-soil contact in that application. Now, when we talk about planting green, it used to mean getting out the 4440 John Deere and hooking up to a 7,000 planter. That used to be planting green. One of the reasons why we run red equipment is so we can actually find the tractor in the rye field. This is planting soybeans into a cover crop blend. So the fall before would have been a whole host of species. And then in the spring of 16, the rye comes back, and along with some kale and some turnips, and I forget what all came back. But kale is great for salad, but it's not that great for soybean fields. And so we found out that the kale was, with its waxy leaves, it was really hard to control in crop. And in fact, we didn't control it very well. And so on the side of the field that had kale on the mix the fall before, ran 50 bushels. And the other side, which was other species of cover crops with rye and no kale, was 60 bushels. So those kale plants are almost like a big burdock that just crowded out the soybeans. So yes, we learned our lesson on kale. Some of those species may be best left out of the blend, depending what you're going into. Maybe something like corn, you could control it better. But in soybeans, you're limited when you're on IP beans. Buckwheat takes a lot of perseverance. You can't spray it off. They don't want desiccants on it. You're supposed to wait for a frost and believe it then or not. Then that fall you don't have any frost until Halloween. And so we tried swathing some. That wasn't my best day of farming. It was wrapping around the rail, and I was about ready to put a torch to the sprayer, to the swather, but alas, it was borrowed, so I couldn't do that. We ran a bunch of it through the combine straight, and one of my brothers spent a couple hours trying to get that out of the beaters of the combine. On a more positive note then, we have some recent successes in planting green. Reduced pesticides planting green. We'll talk more about that. Each of these points have some slides to follow. Able to harvest more crops when the ground is drier. I think that's a plus when it comes to handling compaction. Better opportunities to plant covers and apply manure because of more crops harvested in the late summer versus in the late fall, early winter. And we've had relatively good success planting crops green. Isn't that just a great phrase? Everything's green nowadays, green energy, green this and that. And here we are at a farm conference, and we're even using the same term in our planting techniques. So should be some government funding for that. And then I'll show you a picture of our corn head. Sometimes the concept in no-till is that if you don't use tillage, then you got to use more chemicals. And we have found actually the opposite to be true in our one and only year of planting green. But we are fairly excited about the results of that. And so here we are planting soybeans into a rye cover crop. And some of this stuff was knee high, as you can see in the right-hand photo. And so there's a lot of biomass there. And yet the planter just seemed to cruise right through that, really without any issues, and had a nice seed soil contact. Then we ran over with a smooth roller, packed it down, and then I sprayed a shot of Roundup and a bit of 2,4-D to make sure some of those broadleaf species died, and had a pretty good control on the weed on the covers at that point. Interestingly enough, on some of our edible beans and some of our soybean fields, that was it for chemicals. That was it. And we had virtually no weeds in some of the portions of those fields right till harvest. And I was excited about that. Growing IP soybeans, we're used to, and edible dry beans, we're used to shelling out $60, $70, $80 of chemistry in order to keep the weeds under control. And admittedly, there's a few portions of the field I should have gone in and spot sprayed, but by and large, some of those fields were relatively clean with only a shot of burn down post-plant and some 2,4-D. So we're fairly excited about that and see how it works in the future. And so one of the side advantages, I guess, or maybe a big advantage, considering that we're talking about compaction today, is the timing of harvest for a lot of these crops. And years ago, my dad refused to grow corn because he said, "I hate working in mud." And when I was a kid and a young teenager, I thought working in mud was great fun. You know, the more mud you could sling out the back off those tires when you got back in the road there, the more fun it was. But once I'm older and understanding the concepts of what's going on in terms of soil damage and equipment stress in those wet conditions, yeah, I'm just like Dad. I hate mud. And so the more we can do in dry conditions, the better. And so we have all these crops that we can typically harvest in dry or conditions. Soybeans, wheat, oats, buckwheat. Dry beans usually come off in fairly early time frame. Peas are a mid-August time frame. And canola is the end of August. So there's 7 out of 8 of our crops that we'd like to have done while the ground's good and dry. And to me, that's a tremendous advantage. To us, I should say, is a tremendous advantage to have that many crops out of the way. And this fall, we got our soybeans done, we got our corn done, and here I had this combine and nothing to do. And I said to the boys, "Let's go and do some custom work or do something. We got to make this combine pay." And Jerry said, "Yeah, but we got all our acres done already. We just were combining and everybody else was waiting for the soybeans to be ready." And there we are doing peas and canola and stuff like that. So I think it's a tremendous advantage to have those opportunities to harvest earlier in the season before things get wet. The other advantage to earlier harvested crops for us is to have more time to apply manure and either drag hose or tankers we have custom done. And one thing about it, it's a lot easier to find a custom guy who has time for you in the month of August versus the last week in April or the third week in September when you're trying to get your beans pounded off and your wheat pounded in and the guy just can't get there in time. You know how frustrating that is, and I understand they can only do so much. And so for us, it's a great advantage to have expanded time frame for manure application. And immediately after that, we'll go in with our sulfur drill and plant in that cover crop. And with the coulters on the air seeder, we're doing a little bit of incorporation, and solid seeded cover crops are immediately taking up those nutrients from the manure that we've accessed from neighboring operations. And so planting green 2016. There's a picture on the left of planting corn into rye that may have been about 12 to 14 inches high, and terminated immediately after with Roundup and Halex, a bit of residual product there. And the photo on the right shows The corn is up probably 4 or 5 leaf, and everything else is brown. That field average 188. Soybeans on the bottom left is post-plant there into a field that was probably knee-high in rye and hairy vetch. A lot of biomass there, planted in there, relatively easy, and ended up at 55 bushels. And that shot there on the right-hand side is, we did pre-harvest glyphosate on that for harvestability across the board, but there is not much weed pressure in that field, and that was Roundup only post-plant. So we need a good green seed bed. That's our soybean planter there with the nose coulter, and really no modifications to do there, pretty much straight from the factory. And we just love that seed bed. I mean, there's all this vegetation, but it's all standing. And Jerry's the planter guru, and he's picky about planting. He's picky about planter setup. And by the way, Jerry's going to join us up here for the Q&A, so the actual questions he can answer better than I can. He put this presentation together. I'm good at talking, even if I don't know what I'm talking about. But he is the guy with the understanding and the research behind all this stuff, so he'll be joining us up here. But he loves the soil texture of planting into this stuff. Now, you know, when you go with the disc or the VT and work that stuff in, then you got all this biomass mixed with the soil. And when you get your planter in there, you don't know whether you got the seed against soil or not. It might be parked up against a bunch of residue. So Jerry feels it's a lot easier to set a planter when everything's up on top, whether it's dry no-till stock, corn stalks, or whether it's planting green. At least with planting green, the stuff is crisp. It's easy to cut through, and even there's a lot of roots down in there. It was still we still got good seed to soil contact. There's the corn planter rolling through the vetch and rye and turnip and whatever all's in there, and a bit of a row cleaner action and a colder action and a bit of a strip there. The corn thinks it has a chance when it comes out of the ground. Observation here, custom planting for a neighbor. On the left-hand side where there's no P, cover crop terminated in the fall of 2015, and so is planted brown, no-till, and versus planting into 19 species cover crop, planting green, yields just about par. So that's just an observation. That's not a side-by-side. That's not a university study, but that's what we saw. We have a 16-year-old corn head on a class 7 combine, and it weighs less than a regular 12-row head, aluminum model built in South America, and so we have less weight on our front axle because of that. Soybean tillage trial, we're planting green there in front of the elevator, and Jeff and I thought we should do a trial and see what the difference is, tillage versus non-tillage. Jerry said, forget about it, don't worry about it, waste of time. Jeff and I prevailed, and so we disked that thing to death a couple times to make sure we worked in all the residue. And so on the modified minimum tillage, surface tillage, work it in, whatever you want to call it, 52, and the other side without anything planted green, doing everything wrong, according to the books, 56 bushels, not bad. Future focus and ideas, we want to continue to rely on no-till and pursue our cover crop blends. This is not our phrase, but borrowed from, I forget where, using roots, not iron. And we believe that that is our way to go in improving soil health and structure, and continue to explore the limits of reducing crop inputs. We really hate tillage. That's where we did a tile drain installation a couple years ago. Had to work the thing to death to get it all leveled down again. And okay, beautiful seed bed. How many people love this seed bed? Bare soil. The corn can come up. No competition, no green stuff, no weeds. It's beautiful. But until you get an inch of rain, and 1 inch of rain and the water is running off of that field instead of soaking in. That's why we get back to no-till as soon as possible. In our cover crop blends, you get double whammy from these things. You get a lot of biomass in the fall, and then depending on what you've planted in there, you got crimson clover, you got turnips, you got rye coming back in the spring, and you get another batch in the spring, and if you wait till middle of May, then you've got a lot of stuff going on for you there. And so one question we have is how much can we reduce inputs? Can we reduce nitrogen? We got vetch, we got crimson clover in there. They're producing and fixing nitrogen. How much is that going to benefit the following corn crop or other crops? And like we talked about the reduced pesticides with the rye cover. I think there's some exciting things there. One check we had was field there with fertilizer strip. We had chicken manure across the whole part of the field. And on the left-hand side, we had full fertilizer program. And on the right-hand side, we had no commercial fertilizer. I tried out a planter from the dealer that wasn't equipped with fertilizer. So we thought, great, we'll do a full program versus none. And that's the results. No commercial fertilizer, 154. Side dress only with nitrogen with the Y drop, 170. And starter nitrogen with the planter side dress, 188. So we're obviously getting a payback on our fertilizer. But for none, excuse me, but for none, their organic farmers would be happy with 154, and that would be too. So interesting to see what kind of results you get. Takeaway points, bing, bing, bing. Are you sure no-till isn't for you? I mean, anybody can try it. And I really think Ohio State should try a comparison on compaction between horseshoes and wheels. How thick to plant rye? 50 pounds drilled in mid-September with liquid manure applied was that stuff up to here. 60 pounds planted in November with no manure, and it wasn't very big at all. So how thick depends on when you're going to apply it and what you're going to put with it. Cutting cover crop costs, everybody's concerned about how much does it cost to plant a cover crop, and I don't want to blow $30, $40. Well, some of the stuff you can cut back. A pound of turnip seed is thousands of seeds there, so you can maybe cut that back. Oats, the same thing. You don't need 100 pounds of oats, maybe 20 or 40 as a suggestion. And so terminating the cover crop is important because you want that crop, that corn crop, to be the one you take to the bank, and you want to make sure it has a good getaway there. And so for us, the compaction management strategies boils down to one thing: soil structure. Soil structure. And so our whole concept and farm operation and decisions we make is pretty much zeroed in on soil structure. Thank you for your time. You're welcome to come and visit us. If you come in May, look for the rye field with a cab of a tractor sticking out the top. And if you come in September, look for the first field of sunflowers west of Listowel on Highway 86. Thank you.